Now, I'm just going to tell you two stories today, and they'll both be short, and I think that you'll see from each of them that I don't even really need to draw a conclusion, but I just want to remind you of a couple of things as we're in this nativity season. But first of all, I should introduce myself. I'm Father Ernesto Obregon. Actually, if you want to pronounce it correctly, El Padre Ernesto Obregon. However, I find most people find that a little difficult, which is why all the Dimitri are Williams, right? I'm Father Ernesto Obregon. My family came here as refugees when I was 9 years old. And I happened to be Lisa's dad, you know, and Rafi and Connor's grandfather, and Theo and Dallas's uncle. If you're wondering how I ended up here, it's their fault. Because I told Father Paul, grandkids, you can invite me anytime. So that's why I'm here. I'm actually, frankly, more here as a grandfather. No offense to you all, but I'm here as a papoose, you know. This is to let Father Paul have some rest as well, which he's doing. So that gives you an idea who I am. I'm adjunct at Holy Trinity, Holy Cross Greek Orthodox Cathedral in Birmingham. Adjunct is a nice way of saying I'm retired and everybody grabs me to be a supply priest. Now, one of the interesting parts of being a supply priest is you've seen it already. Wait, everybody's turning right. Why did I turn left? Because we know that one of the great principles of orthodoxy is that we all do things the same except when we don't. So if you see a couple more places where we seem to cross, yep, we did. Have a smile, enjoy yourselves, and say, supply priest, right? And don't worry about it. Obviously, if I were here long enough, I'd catch on to how it's done at this Orthodox church that does it the same way as every other Orthodox church. Now, the two stories. One of them, you may not realize, but the Greek Orthodox in America, not just the Greek Orthodox in general, had a strong part in starting missions in Latin America and South America for the Orthodox. I don't know if you've ever heard of a bishop, his name in Spanish would be Pablo de Ballester, who was born in Spain. But he served in the U.S. under Archbishop Iacovos, if you remember Archbishop Iacovos. And now, let me get to the story, and it's brief. Bishop Pablo was born in Spain and became a Franciscan monk. But somewhere along the line, he realized there was something wrong. Yes, the trouble was they made the mistake of training the man. And you know, the problem is whenever you read church history and theology, if there's a bit of honesty in you, you go, what I'm seeing in the West, I'm sorry to put it that way, doesn't match what I'm seeing in the Bible, in the Fathers, in that, wait a minute, what's going on? And that's what he asked. His initial move was to go to the Anglicans. He quickly realized, no, they're just, this also, there's something wrong here. By the way, Bishop Pablo de Ballester wrote about his journey, how I became Orthodox. The only problem is the book is hard to find in English, but easy to find in Greek. Right. It was published by one of the Stavro monasteries on Mount Athos.
Stavronikitas.
Thank you. He learned Greek by way of going to Greece. He decided, I need to go, not where it started. We all know it started in Bethlehem, don't we? That's where it started, folks. All right? So, however, since Greece is where the Patriarch of Constantinople is. We won't talk about illegal borders. You can tell which side I'm on in that dispute. Yes, I don't call it Istanbul either. Because I too have gotten a great love for what Greece has done, but Bishop Pablo, who I would consider nowadays one of my models, went and studied there for 10 years. And he ended up being ordained a deacon and a priest there. And I have no idea why it entered into the Patriarch of Constantinople's mind and the Archbishop of Athens to send them to America. I mean, wouldn't you want to send them to some place that spoke Spanish? Oh, wait, there's not that many Spanish-speaking churches back at that time in Latin America. And so they sent him. He went to Pennsylvania, I think near Alatoona, but I won't guarantee that. They still have a photograph of him up there and everything. Of course, now they're extremely proud of it. But Archbishop Jacobus, who at that time was Archbishop not just of North America, but of all of them, all the Americas. See, the GOA at that time meant the GOA, not the GONA. That's why it was the Greek Orthodox Church of America. It didn't mean the U.S. The original GOA meant the Americas. And Archbishop Jacobus thought, we need to get something started there. And, of course, neither he nor I are privy to the talks that went on, but eventually the Patriarch of Constantinople said to Archbishop Jacobus, we need to ordain, he was calling himself Paul because he was in the U.S., Father Paul, to be a bishop and send them to Mexico. And so he was. And he was a large part of the growth of the Arquidiócesis de México, the Archdiocese of Mexico. By the way, I happen to be Cuban, not Mexican, but that's okay. And he served there. And in 1984, he died a martyr's death, assassinated in Mexico City. Now, those of you who are old enough, that, like me, who date to the Vietnam era, draftee here, military vet, will remember that in 1980, the Catholic Archbishop Romero was assassinated. It was a bad decade to be a Christian of almost any type in Latin America because leaders were getting slaughtered. Peru also, I've been there and talked to the widow of at least one who was slaughtered by the Shining Path guerrillas, in Spanish called Sendero Luminoso. In fact, the reason we came here was we fled from a communist country. But I mention all that to say the beginning of the growth of the Arquidiócesis de México, at least the Greek one, began under Archbishop Jacobus and was the desire of the Greek Orthodox in the U.S. to say, and of Jacobus especially, if you're going to call me Archbishop of South America, then I need to stick something down there. You know, I mean, doesn't that make sense?
Yes.
And that's what he did. And Bishop Pablo helped to carry it out. So on this day, I want to say it wasn't Greece, it was the Greeks in North America who shelled out to send El Obispo Pablo de Nacianzos, because, of course, the Ballester went away and it became the Nacianzos. You can guess which city that is from the way I pronounced it. And to say to yourself, gosh, how can I help this church? Reach out just to my neighborhood. How can I be like the Greeks at the time of Archbishop Jacobus? Because I guarantee you, at the time of Archbishop Jacobus, there's almost no English in the churches. And those of you who are old enough know that. But they had a vision. And they said, we can't remain here. We have to spread out. And so, in part, let me just thank those good Greeks back then. Didn't speak a word of Spanish. Had the worship in Greek, but had the vision to say, something needs to happen. And let's remember Bishop Pablo, I'm still praying that he'll be officially named a saint. Patriarch of Constantinople got involved. Not the one who was there then, but the next one. And Bishop Pablo had been buried in a cemetery, in Mexico City, close to the church he served. And the patriarch said, it is not fitting for a man who has died for the faith to be just buried there where people don't remember or pray to him. And so the Patriarch of Constantinople had him moved. And El Obispo Pablo is buried now at Archdiocesan headquarters in Mexico, where there's a small little display table that has his bust on it, and he's buried there in the floor covered with marble. And we trust that he's interceding for the church in Mexico.
Amen.
Second story, and I'll try to make this shorter. I went on longer than but this was from when we were in Peru. We spent 10 years in South America, and you can ask Elise about her experiences because she graduated from high school in South America. We were 3 years in Bolivia, and then the bishop asked me to move to Peru, where I was made an archpriest and regional director of all of southern Peru. I had 3 priests under me. One of them was a priest named Alejandro Mesco, who, despite his name, was 100% indigenous Quechua. Matter of fact, I ended up riding out mule to the Quechua lands during my time there because of that priest. But that's another story, because this story has to do with how I found out that I was arrogant and proud, and how God taught me mercy through Father Alejandro Mesco. Father Alejandro and family lived in what's called a Pueblo Joven. If you've read anything about Brazil, equivalent to a favela. Not a place to live, because they start out with people building homes on empty land and have no electricity, no water. And then if they grow large enough, they petition the city to bring in some electricity and so on. But when I first met him, the Pueblo Joven he lived in had barely gotten electricity and so on. And he was a poor priest with his family. I probably shouldn't mention this if the treasurer is around, but back then, as a priest, he got $250 a month. No, you're not going to get away with that here in the U.S. That's why I was afraid to mention it in front of the treasurer, lest he get ideas. But he ran out of money. I don't care where you are, $250 is not enough. And so I had some extra money. North American, come on, we have money. In comparison to the poor, we had money. Not that we got a lot of money compared to anybody in the U.S. Our money qualified us to be high poor. High poor in parts of Peru is low rich. And I was low rich. So I thought, I'm going to help them out. Can you hear my pride and arrogance starting to kick in? And so I went out to the tienda in the Pueblo Joven because I thought, well, I'm not going to buy near where I live. I'm going to go all the way over there so that the people who sell food in those small tiendas, and by the way, if you ever have a chance to go to one of those small tiendas, don't buy the food. You haven't gotten used to it, and you'll pay for it. That's just a fair warning. Just because the locals can eat it doesn't mean you can. But I bought there. And again, you can hear me wanting to show off to the locals how I was going to take care of the priest under my care. This is hindsight. And I took the food to him. And it was a good, massive amount of food. And he and his wife were overwhelmed, overjoyed, and I was happy. And a couple days later, I heard he'd thrown a party for the neighborhood. And I was, but why is he, here's my arrogance, throwing away the food I gave him? So I went there to find out, but I thought, no, Ask him, don't assume. And I'm glad I did. Here was this answer. I said, oh, I heard you had something with the people in the neighborhood. He said, yes, Father. He says, after you gave me all that stuff, I could not watch my neighbors being unable to eat. And so I took the food that you gave me, and I threw a massive block party. Turned out people from 2 blocks around came so they could eat. By the way, I probably bought an amount of food that I would have thought, it would have been good for us for about a month. He fed 2 blocks on that food. All right? And I've never forgotten what he said. How could I eat when they're not eating? Father Alejandro, and by the way, it's a long story, but he ended up starting more churches. He started a little child care center at his house, and people trusted him, and it kept expanding. So he asked the diocese, could you find some money? So they went to some overseas donors in Britain and got some money. When I left, we had gone it all the way up to 8th grade within 2 years of my leaving. That is now the San Lucas High School, of course in Spanish, not in English. Bachiller de San Lucas. Fully accredited in a pueblo joven with fully accredited teachers. Not foreign missionary teachers, local Peruvians. And they managed to raise the money to be able to pay qualified teachers, because normally Pueblo Joven teachers is whoever can teach. No, accredited teachers. And on top of that, they give the kids lunch. They do have one rule. If you sign up your child to be at St. Lucas, you will be part of the rotation to either clean, repair, or maintain the school. And so you have the women of the neighborhood in there taking turns cooking the lunches. The men, if anything needs to be fixed or built, they're out there with the cement and the blocks, and they grew the building with volunteer neighbors, well, not volunteer, from the fathers who were told, if you want your child here, you've got to participate. And now that's a neighborhood school run by the church. And again, I mention that to say, look around you, see what's available. But I also mention that to say, priests can sometimes be real idiots who need to learn a lesson from the Lord. I learned my lesson that day. Mercy has to do with, if necessary, being able to give away the widow's mite and say, it was better that I gave it away. Mercy is when you can't stand having something in your cupboard because there's somebody hungry that you know nearby. Now, I will tell you, Padre Alejandro is not an idiot. I mean, it's not like he gives away so much food he can't feed his family. He knows where the limits are. But his heart was significantly bigger, and probably is still bigger than my heart. Because that's what mercy's all about. So I leave you with those 2 stories to reflect on, the martyr and the merciful priest, so that you can ask yourself, well, what about me? What can I do? How can I reach out? In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.